to growth. Success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Realtor Growth listeners. Today I have Deborah Smith. She is the co-founder and CEO of CenterCap Group, LLC. Merger and acquisitions, but a lot more than just simply that. Thank you, Deborah, for being here today.
Thanks for having me on.
So I always love starting it off with, what's your elevator pitch? If someone asks you, Deborah, what do you do? And I know you kind of walked me through the gamut beforehand. And I mean, what does that look like when someone asks you? Is it simply just mergers and acquisitions, or do you get a little more in depth?
I tend to say we do all things real estate. We built the firm on that mindset that, we had been running the global M&A division for CBREI Global Investors, and in all the coverage that we received from the investment banking community, we didn't feel like anyone really understood our business from a real estate bricks and sticks perspective, which led us to believe, how could we advise people, or how could someone advise someone on their company if they didn't understand what they did? And so we've built our business around that and stayed true to our roots of real estate, and have built out our pitch is always, we do all things real estate.
And I mean, from what you've kind of picked up and surmised, is one of the rare companies that is women owned in this field.
Yeah. So, when I started my career in banking, which seems like a very, very long time ago, it's with Morgan Stanley. There was not a lot of women in the industry then. And banking is notoriously male dominated. The real estate space is notoriously male dominated. So the intersection of the two makes it really, really male dominated. But at the same time, there's plenty of opportunities, I think, for women to grow and succeed in this business. And most of my mentors have been male over time, to which I'm hugely grateful for. But I do get to this point in my career, and with a lot of people saying, well, how did you do it? I look around and there's not a lot of us that have made it to the top. And it does, become some very introspective as to why that is. And then, we do have a women-owned firm, and I don't know of any other women-owned firms in the real estate banking space. It's, what did we do, and taking the time and thinking about that, and then how we can give back and work with other younger female professionals to take the path and follow in the footsteps that we chose.
Do you have thoughts of why you think it's mostly male dominated?
Look, finance, I tend to think it's a very analytical, finance-driven business. It tends to be it's tough. You have to, you can't second guess decisions. You have to be very straightforward. You've got to be very confident. You've got to be a risk taker. And I think you can't look in the rearview mirror. You can't let stuff bother you. And I think, men have an easier time with that than females do, who are by nature are nurturers. And so that it's women's intuition, which I take as just excellent judgment. We have excellent judgment, and I don't think we rely on it enough. And then I think, at the high school level and maybe even at the middle school level, it's continuing to find female role models who have gone through a finance path and holding up those role models to say, hey, look, you don't need to think twice about pursuing this type of profession. You can do it, and you've got the chops to do it. And having those role models out there so that more younger female professionals are willing to take the risk to pursue it. I just don't think it's not a natural path that in my travels that I've noticed working with college students and high school students, that is a natural path that females tend to want to pursue. There's a lot of things they want to pursue, and that's usually not it. Whereas if you talk to a male, they're more inclined to want to go through this path versus some of the alternative choices. And I think it's, continuing to create exposure and offering a different way of doing things and ingraining it in people's mind and younger professionals' minds that they don't have to look at it as male dominated or not. They just have to look at it as a choice I want to pursue.
Well, let's talk about your unnatural, I guess, teen years of kind of getting on this path towards being a pioneer. I mean, who was a young Deborah?
Young Deborah grew up on a dairy farm in the middle of nowhere. And I had a very unorthodox upbringing in the sense that, my parents didn't go to high school and my siblings did not go to college. And I was a little out there. I think, I was probably destined to be a dairy farmer's daughter and then to become a dairy farmer myself. We were raised from a very young age to have huge amounts of responsibility on working on a farm. And school was a backseat. It was not a priority by any stretch of the imagination. And so growing up in a house with zero expectation gives you a lot of freedom. It creates a huge amount of freedom. There's no pressure to even finish school. So I got lucky. I've been very lucky throughout my career that I had a teacher when I was in the 11th grade, an economics teacher, who decided that I had some chops academically and said, you know what, you should try this university thing. I was like, what university thing? And helped me fill out the forms and helped me think about what I could do, and really helped me to narrow, to spend the time looking at a different path. And so I'm forever grateful for that, because that one person, I've had a lot of people just like that throughout my career help me to get to where I am.
What did they relay to you? How did they paint the picture for you to change your mindset? Do you remember?
Yeah, look, I actually remember pretty clearly. Me as a person, I don't spend a lot of time overanalyzing things.
Yeah.
So, it's just a character trait. I'm good that someone can present me with a whole bunch of alternatives and I'll pick one. And it's like, well, here are all the alternatives. And I don't sit there and think, well, am I smart enough or good enough to do this? If the options presented there, I only think in terms of whether I want to do it or not. Mm-hmm. And that is the way I've always functioned, even from when I was younger. And these are the new options. And so I ended up doing a double degree in economics and law at the University of Sydney. And if in retrospect, if I had thought for a minute, whether I was smart enough, good enough, or from the right background to do that career, I wouldn't have done it. But none of those things crossed my mind. There was an option put in front of me. I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. And, course selection, it was one of the hardest courses to get into. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And that's how it is. It's always a case of not thinking about whether I'm smart enough, good enough, or whether it's whether it's within reach. It's more a case of, well, this is what I want to do. So how am I going to get it? And that is it's a character trait. I think it makes you a little bit happier, because then you don't have to be filled with regret. That's the positive.
So how does it look with your parents being dairy farmers, your siblings being in that space too, at least not going to college? Was there any kind of negativity for you trying to get out of that circle?
Yeah, sure. So my father told me, how was I going to survive in a man's world? I did take that note. And I was like, what do you mean? But again, it was a comment I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about. It's either I had been accepted into economics law, doing a combined degree, and I was going to do it the best I can. And I didn't spend much more time than that. And I do think that growing up in the household we did, everyone makes their own path and makes their own choices. And my parents and I and my siblings and I went in different directions. And yes, it caused some friction, as I think you would expect. And for most people who grow up in a similar background to mine and want to take a different path, that story is gonna resonate with them, because I don't think it's an unfamiliar one. But I think most of it, I look back now, is just grounded in it's a lack of knowledge of what is out there and what is available, married with a lack of desire to want to take the risk to explore it. And that's how I look at it. It's, you can, I'm a big believer that there's a lot of choices and a lot of things people can do. And you just got to push down that fear And that piece of you that says, I don't know, it's new, it's unknown, and forget about it and just go with it and assume you'll figure it out. And if it goes sideways, you'll figure it out. And what's the worst thing can happen? I say that a lot. What's the worst thing can possibly happen? So it's that little mindset. I mean, it drove me when I was younger and continues to drive me in what I do today.
What's that process look like, right? I mean, so some people, okay, I'm going to go down this path and I'm going to look 5 years in the future. Okay, this is if I go this path, this is what could happen. And it sounds like there's almost just like, I'm just curious to see what happens if I go down this path. I mean, was that who you were, just kind of curious, or did you actually know where that next mile was going to take you?
I'm not a big long-term planner. In fact, I don't long-term plan at all. I look at more in terms of milestones, and then maybe I'll adjust a plan to that milestone. But, when I decided, for example, I was going to college, and that option was there, and I was like, all right, I'll give this a go, and putting in my application. So then once I made the decision, I just picked one of the hardest courses to get into, and I'll see what happens. And I got into the course, and then, my peers around me had big visions and dreams of what they wanted to do, and I didn't really have any. And so I just went down the path of completing both of my degrees. And as the opportunity presented, I was going to go and become a tax lawyer. And then a banking position popped up. And so I was fortunate enough to land that position. But I had no goals to be an investment banker at all. And but once I'd set my mind on it and I got the job, I wanted to be the best at it. I wanted to be the best. And so, and I've outlasted most of my peers, and I'm still doing banking today. But it's those little milestones that if you're going to do something, you give it an A effort, and it's a work ethic issue that I'm particularly focused on. And whether it's washing your dishes or making your bed or writing an essay, whatever it is, if you're not going to give me an A effort, don't bother. I'm not interested in B's. And so I take that with everything. And so with each milestone, if one pops up and I pursue it, I do it the very best I can. And sometimes that attaches a goal to it as to what that means to do it the best I can. And sometimes it doesn't. It's just I get an enormous amount of enjoyment out of doing things well.
I mean, and it sounds like you very open to opportunities and milestones like you talk about when they arise. I mean, how has that changed, especially now that you own this firm and you have so many other people underneath you? It's not just you kind of going towards these opportunities and milestones. How has that changed the way you look at them?
Yeah. When we started our firm, we didn't have big visions, I don't think, at the time to be where we are today. It's not what I could have contemplated. At the time we had decided to want to be all things real estate, and we had a short-term goal of what that meant and how we were going to execute it. But there was no forever, we're going to build this into where we've managed to achieve it today. To get here today was a series of little milestones on hitting them and then creating a new one and hitting them and creating new ones. And it was an iterative process. I think what's been most interesting to me is somewhere between when we started to today, our firm has a culture. It has a real culture, and we have a real team, and our team is exceptional. We have an exceptional team, and I thank my lucky stars every day that the partnership I have, and our senior leadership team, and as well as the rest of our junior staff and everybody who contributes to make our firm a place where people want to come to work each day. And I do appreciate that the leaders at the top have a great influence over what that looks like, and the happiness of our team. And I take a lot of pride. It's probably one of my greatest success stories, is being able to create the team that we have.
You used a couple words of some adjectives, right? And how would you describe that culture? I mean, I know you said happy. I mean, there's a couple other ones kind of sprinkled in there. How would you describe the culture?
Well, they all seem to they have a very similar work ethic to me. Surprise, surprise. They have a very similar work ethic. People take a lot of pride in their work. They're very smart. They process very quickly. But the big thing about our team is they're very team oriented. And in banking, that is rare. They generally want everyone else to be successful. and are very comfortable contributing to everybody else's success around them. And that is something we reward as owners of our firm, that we reward that because, as one of my team members said to me one day, we can't afford to mess this up. We can't afford to have an ego in this firm because then it just ruins, it impacts the reputation of the firm if we get it wrong. And it really stuck with me because I agree with it, but it was refreshing to hear it from within the ranks of our firm that mindset was similarly shared. That, when you start a firm and you have it as a partnership, and a lot of partnerships don't work. And I think it's part because they spend a lot of time. You get to a point where you start thinking about what you're contributing and what someone else is contributing. Is what you're contributing worth more than what they're contributing? And there's this concept that creates wedges in long-term relationships. And whether actually it's in marriage or friendships, whatever it is, people have a tendency to revert back to their contribution and what that is worth. And, my partnership has been friends, partners for 20 years. And I don't spend a whole lot of time doing that. I don't know how to measure the work that I don't have to do. And I understand you can measure the value you think what you're doing, but how do you measure the value of what someone else is doing? And that's a lot more complicated. And I think, so as a result, I don't spend a lot of time doing that. And I think as a result, the partnership that we have is incredibly strong. It's incredibly team driven, and it's comforting that strength is mirrored downwards throughout the firm.
Do you think if you had your firm went away and you had to start fresh, do you think you could replicate that culture that you've built now in a new firm?
That's hard. It took a long time to get the people we have. We're very hard at hiring. It takes us a long time to fill out ranks, and making sure that it's someone that our entire firm believes is a good ad. And so I think I have a good handle on what makes our culture as strong as it does. So I'd like to think I can. Do I think I could do it as well without my team? That's a different question. It's the team I've got is a pretty good one. I don't know if at this point I'd almost call them irreplaceable real estate.
I guess keeping on the hiring process, because it's like you said, it's such a core. What's that process of, okay, we have a position that needs to be filled. How long does it usually take for your firm to actually find someone to fill that position?
A long time. But the way we do our hiring is we like to empower people throughout our firm to be involved in that process. We as senior team leaders, obviously the ultimate decision sits with us, but we don't go against a broader feel from the firm. And part of that is based from my own upbringing when I was an analyst back in the day, is that the junior folks, particularly if you bring in someone at the junior ranks, they have to sit with that person, work with that person, and carry that person if they aren't very good. And so we install that team culture throughout, that you're only ever as strong as your weakest link. And so as a result, everyone bears the burden of making good hiring decisions. It doesn't just sit on my shoulders.
Running back a little bit to, to the beginning part of building the firm. We really talked about basically you building something that has been so male focused, right? Mm-hmm. Was there any negative words around the water cooler, words in the industry while you were kind of building it out? And it doesn't seem like you're too much of taking in those outside voices. And did you hear anything like that?
Yeah, look, and maybe they were, and I just wasn't smart enough to see it. I think if anything, when we started the firm, there is a thought process whether we're going to survive. And maybe that's accentuated because we were women. Do we have the chops to make it? We built a real estate bank in the middle of the financial crisis where there was no credit. It was like, of all my smart ideas, I don't know if that was a good one. But nonetheless, that's what we did. And so there is some of that as a small firm, but I think a lot of small firms face that same issue. It's, are you going to survive? Do you have the bandwidth? How do you get things done? when you are a small shop. And for us, we don't have a balance sheet, we don't have research, we don't have trading. And so we're already in the penalty box of being able to compete with the firms that we had come from. I'd been at Lehman, I'd been at Wachovia, I'd been at Morgan Stanley. And you can't compete at that level when you don't have those resources, because real estate is a leveraged business. And so we could only survive on the strength of the advice and the strength of our hard work and the strength of our own ability to figure stuff out and succeed on that and take some risk and hope that we were right. And then finding some clients that were willing to hire us despite the fact that we didn't have all of those things that our brethren in the banking space had.
Did you ever get to the point where you had to have a plan B?
I'm not really good with plan Bs. I was on, look, we had made this decision that we were going down this path. Yeah. And it was going to work. It was going to work. I say that all the time. This is going to work. And it was more a function then of what did we need to do to make it work and to continue to grow. And no matter how hard we had to work, what did we need to do? And there was not ever a thought that we shouldn't do it once the decision had made. And there was no second guessing of backing out and doing something else. We decided to go down this path, and that's the way it was going to be.
I know you've already said that you're not into looking far down the road.
My long-term planning deficiencies?
Yeah. And if you could look maybe to a milestone that you plan to hit in 6 months, a year, however far you can make it, where are you going to be in that time? Where's the firm going to be?
Yeah. So right now, I mean, for us, it's we're thinking right now of moving more into the principal investing business. And, at the back of my mind, it's kind of been there since we started the firm. But I accept, and the advice I give folks is you can't do everything all at the same time that are new. You can't be successful at everything all at the same time when it's all new things. So you kind of have to pick your spots. So, we built out the capital raising, which is what we were doing. That was our first mantra. Then we built out the M&A business, and the consulting business we started really building out in 2019. We're at a point now where our capital raising business is successful. So we then spent the time building out our insurance companies, pensions, corporate foundations business so that we could do private placements, because you need that relationship base to do that. So then we moved into that path once we were solid on our capital raising. What we've realized across our firm is that what we're really good at is underwriting companies and underwriting management teams and figuring out the new things and the new ideas that are going to be, or we believe are going to be successful. And a lot of the times we've been right. And we've made a lot of good judgment calls around where we think the industry is going and how, whether it's COVID or the GFC or different things have impacted the business. We've been good at seeing those trends. So when we marry those things together, we thought, well, look, maybe what we should be doing is investing with companies, because, right now we provide advice. And a lot of the smaller companies we can't work with because we're expensive. And so we have to, instead of passing on those opportunities when we know they're good ideas, well, let's invest with them and incubate them and help them to grow. So that piece of our business now, we're starting to spend more time in and starting to flesh out the best way to build that business so that it sits cohesively with the rest of the business, but also with our relationships in the institutional market that we rely on and that we function and work with every day.
With the companies, and I know you're in the earlier stages of it, investing in these companies, what are you looking for? Because now you have, I guess, less control on the company, and you're basically giving, I guess, the capital to help them grow, expand. So what are you usually looking for, and what have you seen success in those companies to invest in, I guess?
Yeah. Me personally, it's what I think is two of the most important things for any entrepreneur when they're building out a business. And the first one is grit and hard work. If they're not willing to work hard and they're not willing to figure stuff out, they're not my team. Because they're not, they're not. I think they have more challenging time surviving. The second piece is how adaptable they are. How adaptable they are, because you can have a great idea, but if you get too set on every component of it and it's not working and you can't shift gears, it's the quickest way to go out of business because you're trying to market something that nobody wants. So you have to figure out how to constantly take information out there, you take it in, process it, and learn what to do with it. And don't let too much ego get involved in that piece. It's just that, just accept what is and let it evolve and see where it takes you. And if you have those skills, they are a foundation for a good lead on a management team. And then it's finding the products and being able to underwrite the products for what we think makes sense. Because what we often find is that some companies earlier stage, they may have a great idea, but they need to understand for it to be successful, you have to figure out how it makes money. And you got to figure out how it makes money. If it doesn't make any money, no one's going to lend you money. No one's going to invest in your business if you cannot provide a path for how it actually can generate a return. And so it's actually amazing to me how many companies out there that don't look at their business from, it doesn't have to be from a planning perspective, but from how this business model can make money. And I think you have to be able to look at your business in that way and be able to adjust for the alternatives from there to figure out how to grow it.
I've had a couple different venture capitalists on this platform, and it's from what most of them have said, it's 1,001 is usually kind of their rough ballpark of 1,000 companies I've talked to. What are you currently seeing?
I think we see a better average than that.
Okay.
But what we tend to do is we decide on the sectors that we like and we want an opportunity in. And then we go look for the operators in that segment. We don't do it the other way. So we're not waiting for people to call us and say, hey, I've got an opportunity. No. What we do is, because of our business mix, where we sit between providers of capital, which is the pension funds, foundations, endowments, private equity shops, and then there are users of capital, people who need the dollars. We sit in the middle because both sides are our clients. And so what we get a very intimate look at what people are doing, what people are interested in doing, and we're able to take all of that and then layer in a macro view and decide where we think the opportunities are going. So for example, cold storage is a space I really like right now, but we've really liked it for some time. We've liked it since, coming into COVID, when we realized there was going to be population shifts and migration shifts, which meant people were going to be moving. And if people are going to move and you're worried about office, you're worried about shopping, and then you got to worry how you're going to get them product. So then you got to worry about logistics, and then you got to worry about, well, if I'm getting them, particularly last mile, and then with vaccines and biomedical, et cetera, it drives up the demand for cold storage. So that became very interesting space for us, but there's not a lot of spec development because it's expensive. It's expensive to build these on a spec basis. So historically, institutions have not liked to do that. Now, so then you start saying, well, we really like that space. Well, who does it? And then we have no problem as a firm. We've been around a long time. We'll call and say, hey, and we'll get to know their business. And we'll decide on folks that we think have the chops to be a good operator or not. And if we think it has the chops, then we can either choose to align with them, or we may introduce them to institutional capital and then work with them on positioning it for the institutional world. Fast forward to today, cold storage definitely has garnered a lot of institutional interest. And so our thesis on it being a space of growth turned out to be correct. And so, that's really cool. And there's some things now that we're looking at where we think there's another layer, but we made the same call on active adult living was one, back on the original OpCo-PropCo structures 15 years ago, the growth of the GP vehicle, the migration now between operations and partnering with insurance capital. A lot of these things over time have tend to be in line with what's actually happened in the market. And so, it's a lot of fun. It's definitely a lot of fun, but it's led us to think, instead of just working on an advisory basis, it's probably time for us to invest with these companies alongside.
How receptive are companies, especially with your firm reaching out to them, receptive to you partnering up with them? I mean, because it's almost coming out of the blue. It's like almost like a cold call, I guess. I know the warmth of it all kind of over time. And how receptive are companies usually?
Yeah, look, so on the operations side, we publish a lot of different perspectives, and we do a lot of involved in the press and are in a lot of publications, et cetera. So our name is definitely out there, but a lot of times we're just reaching out to get to know the company, where we're not looking to do anything other than learn about their business, get to know them as people and as a business, and as a potential client. And we don't have any predispositions going into these relationships other than to continue our path down of learning about what they're doing, learning what the space is, and learning and trying to work through who we think are good operators and who are not. I think for us, we rarely go into a relationship where we're trying to figure out what the outcome is going to be from the outset. We tend to go into it thinking we just want to get to know them. We'll see how it goes.
And I think that's probably for a lot of businesses. They should just go in there, not having like a plan of how they're going to get opportunity out of that person, coming with value, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think it's how I think we generally look at the world. It's to start with a blank piece of paper. And let the peeling of the onion and the research speak for itself. And stop trying to solve for what you think the answer is, because that's back in my camp of making assumptions and hooking onto an idea that maybe has a shitty outcome. It's like, let's just stay on starting with a blank piece of paper. We know what a good management team looks like. We know what we think is a good business mix. But let's just see and let it speak for itself, and let's just see where it goes. It's a line I say all the time. Let's just see what happens. Let's just let it play out, and we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for being on the Road to Growth podcast. If anyone's listening right now and they're looking to get more information about the firm, yourself, I mean, what's the best platform?
Yeah, so we have our website, CenterCapGroup.com. We're also on LinkedIn for CenterCap Group, and you can find me too, Deborah Smith, and if you type in CenterCap on LinkedIn, I pop right up. Anyone can feel free to reach out. I'm always open to good ideas, and feel free.
And Deborah's information and LinkedIn, all that stuff is in the show notes. So go in the show notes to go find that. I'm going to finish off one last question, Deborah.
Sure.
And again, thank you so much for being on the Road to Growth. And I know your story was kind of happenstance of kind of professor and so on and so forth, and they passed you on. If let's say it's a teen, someone younger, right? And they're kind of debating, they were in the situation that you were, but maybe they're not really sure to go. Is there a good platform that you suggest, or people to talk to about giving them opportunity or showing what's even possible, or even YouTube videos or things like that?
Yeah, look, your best mentors, I think, are always, if you're in school and college, and if we're going back to that level, is always your college professors. And I actively encourage it's that college professors, if you find a good one, it doesn't take much. So a lot of what amazes me is a lot of college students do not build relationships with people in positions like a college professor. And building a relationship. I actually had someone call me one time and ask me, well, how do you get a mentor? I said, I'll tell you how to get a mentor. Reach out and focus on building a relationship. It takes time. But if you can find people who are willing to invest in a relationship as much as you are, it will pay you back, right? And it's not going to be everyone, but find someone you have a connection with, someone you feel good about, and just start there. And I had someone like that in high school, had someone like that in college, someone like that at Morgan Stanley. All along my path to my current business partner was my mentor. So invest, always keep your eyes open. It's the most important thing anyone can learn. It's invest in relationships with people that you have a connection with. And you may not think it has a lot of worth at the time, but it will. That's what I would advise.
Well, and for people listening, I mean, most people are willing to give their time. And if they're not willing to give their time, that's probably a person you don't want to be a part of anyways. But for most people, they're willing to give their time, especially if you're going to do something with the value that they're providing to you.
Correct.
Thank you, Deborah, so much for being on the Road Growth podcast. I hope everyone listening got some great nuggets. I mean, be aware of opportunities. There's so many opportunities out there. And when an opportunity arises, be okay, just like Deborah did, to go down that path, because if she wasn't willing to go down that path, you never know. We might be talking about
dairy farming,
dairy farming, and how to get the best milk. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe, please share, and go in the show notes and go find Deborah. Bye, everyone.